Have you ever felt like no matter how hard you try, life just doesn't line up? You're grinding, hustling, checking off all the right boxes, but still something feels off. Here's the truth. When God isn't first, everything else starts out of order. But when you make Him your priority, everything changes. Sometimes in ways you don't expect, sometimes in ways that completely blow your mind. Please subscribe if you haven't yet, and stay with us in faith. Today, we're diving into 5 things that happen when you truly put God first. And it's not about becoming perfect or having life magically handed to you. It's about shifting your perspective, finding peace in the chaos, and stepping into a life that actually feels alive, meaningful, and unstoppable. Whether you're struggling with decisions, relationships, or just trying to figure out your next step, putting God first transforms the ordinary into the extraordinary. You start seeing doors open that you didn't even know existed. You discover a peace that isn't dependent on your circumstances, and your faith stops being something you think about and becomes something you live. So buckle up, because what you're about to hear isn't just inspirational, it's practical, life-changing, and way more exciting than you think. Number 1, your priorities shift effortlessly. When you put God first, one of the most noticeable changes isn't dramatic at first. It doesn't come with fireworks or a sudden life makeover. What happens is subtler, yet more powerful. Your priorities begin to shift effortlessly, almost without you realizing it. Things that used to take up hours of your time suddenly feel less important. Decisions that used to stress you out become clearer, as if a fog lifts and you can finally see the path ahead. You start recognizing what truly matters and what was just noise. It's not about forcing yourself to care less about certain things. It's about your heart naturally aligning with a higher perspective, one that God gives when He is the center of your life. Before putting God first, it's easy to measure success by the world's standards: money, status, recognition, or even busy schedules. You might find yourself constantly juggling tasks, chasing deadlines, or comparing your achievements to someone else's highlight reel. But when God becomes your priority, these benchmarks begin to lose their grip on your mind. Your goals start to take on a different shape. Success is no longer defined by how much you have or how many people notice your efforts. It becomes about living with intention, making choices that honor God and build a meaningful life. Things that once seemed urgent are now secondary, and things that were once overlooked take their rightful place in your life. Your daily routines also start to shift. Simple decisions like how you spend your mornings, what conversations you prioritize, or even how you handle stress begin to reflect your new focus. You may find yourself naturally waking up earlier to spend time in prayer or reflection. You might start listening to the people around you more carefully, noticing their needs and responding in ways that are intentional instead of reactive. It doesn't feel forced because it's coming from a heart that has realigned itself with God's vision. Your choices start flowing in a way that feels effortless because they are being guided by something bigger than your own will or agenda. This shift in priorities also brings a sense of freedom. Before, your schedule might have felt like a chain, a constant race to meet obligations that didn't always matter. You may have experienced guilt for saying no or anxiety over the things left undone. But as God becomes your first love, that pressure eases. You begin to see that not everything requires your energy or attention. You start discerning between what is necessary and what is merely distracting. Your calendar doesn't dictate your peace anymore. Your alignment with God does. There is a natural pull toward what is meaningful and away from what is trivial. It's not a rigid formula or a checklist. It's an intuitive sense of purpose that begins to guide you. Another remarkable effect is clarity in long-term vision. When God is first, your life no longer feels like a series of disconnected tasks. You start seeing patterns and connections you never noticed before. Decisions about work, relationships, finances, and personal growth start fitting together in ways that make sense. You recognize opportunities that align with your calling and learn to let go of pursuits that do not. This clarity doesn't come from external advice or even from sheer effort. It comes from an internal attunement to God's guidance. Priorities that once felt confusing or conflicting now have a natural order, and you move through life with greater confidence and direction. It's also important to notice how relationships are affected. When God is first, you begin to prioritize people differently. Your time and attention naturally gravitate toward those who matter most, those who are in line with your values and purpose. Toxic or draining interactions lose their power over you because they no longer fit into the framework of what God has called you to focus on. This doesn't mean you avoid responsibility or compassion for others, but you stop scattering your energy on things that distract from your calling. Relationships become more intentional, and the time you invest produces deeper connection and lasting impact. One of the most beautiful aspects of this shift is how effortless it feels over time. Early on, you may notice the change as a conscious effort, a deliberate choice to realign yourself with God. But eventually, it becomes a natural rhythm. Your priorities are no longer a checklist you try to follow. They become a reflection of your heart. You start choosing what matters without thinking, guided by a sense of purpose that has been nurtured through prayer, reflection, and obedience. What once felt like a struggle to balance work, family, faith, and personal growth now flows in harmony because your focus has a fixed point: God. This realignment also has a ripple effect on your emotional and mental well-being. Anxiety, indecision, and restlessness begin to decrease because you are no longer living according to the world's arbitrary standards. There is less comparison and more contentment, less confusion and more clarity. You recognize that time spent in God-centered activities is never wasted, even if it doesn't produce immediate visible results. Your energy becomes more sustainable because it is directed toward what truly matters. Your heart feels lighter, not because life becomes perfect, but because your focus is steady and your purpose is clear. Even in moments of challenge or uncertainty, this shift in priorities remains a guiding compass. Life will always present difficulties, but when your priorities are rooted in God, the way you respond changes. You are less likely to be swayed by panic, distraction, or temptation. Instead, you can respond with discernment, patience, and clarity. The decisions you make reflect your deeper values rather than reactive impulses. You may even find that opportunities that once seemed impossible now feel within reach because your focus is aligned with God's vision, not your own limited perspective. In the end, putting God first transforms your life quietly but profoundly. Your priorities no longer feel like a burden or a constant juggling act. They shift naturally and effortlessly because they are guided by a source of wisdom, love, and purpose greater than yourself. You begin living in a way that feels intentional without effort, meaningful without strain, and aligned with a higher calling without constant struggle. The stress of trying to make everything happen fades, replaced by a confident flow that comes from knowing your focus is in the right place. Your priorities shift, not because you push them, but because your heart has found its true center. When your priorities shift effortlessly, life begins to make sense in ways you never imagined. You no longer chase what is fleeting or insignificant. You invest in what truly matters. Your days are filled with purpose, your relationships deepen, and your sense of peace expands. The world may still rush around you, still demand your attention, still tempt you with distractions, but you are no longer pulled in every direction. You have learned the secret of living with God at the center, and when your priorities are in the right place, Everything else starts to fall into its proper order. Number 2, peace becomes your default mode. When you put God first, one of the most noticeable shifts is the way peace begins to settle into your life. This is not the kind of peace that depends on circumstances or the absence of challenges. It is a deep, steady calm that becomes your default mode, a grounding force that carries you through the noise and chaos of everyday life. At first, it may seem surprising, almost unreal, because life has a way of throwing unexpected problems at everyone. Bills pile up, relationships get complicated, work feels overwhelming, and the world often seems unpredictable. But when God is first, peace stops being an occasional visitor and starts becoming a constant companion. You notice it in small moments, like waking up without dread, handling stress without panic, or simply sitting quietly and feeling that everything will be okay. This peace is not the result of avoiding problems or pretending that difficulties do not exist. It is not about denial or trying to control outcomes. Real peace comes from trust. It comes from knowing that there is a higher plan, that God is guiding your life, and that your worth and purpose are not defined by temporary setbacks or external validation. When God is first, your mind and heart begin to rest in this truth. You start to understand that circumstances may change, but your inner calm does not have to. You learn to distinguish between what is in your control and what is not, and that understanding releases a tremendous weight from your shoulders. Before putting God first, stress and anxiety often feel unavoidable. You wake up thinking about everything you need to accomplish, every problem you need to solve, and every relationship you are trying to manage. Your mind races, your energy feels scattered, and even small setbacks can spiral into frustration or worry. You may find yourself replaying conversations, regretting decisions, or fearing the future. This is natural when your focus is on yourself and the demands of the world. But when God takes priority, this pattern begins to shift. Your mind starts to settle because you are anchored in something larger than your own effort or understanding. Your decisions are guided by perspective, not panic, and your heart learns to rest in the knowledge that you are not carrying the weight of life alone. This peace also transforms the way you interact with others. When you are no longer consumed by anxiety or stress, you begin to listen more attentively, speak more thoughtfully, and respond with patience instead of reaction. Conflicts that once triggered anger or resentment are now handled with a calm, clear perspective. Relationships become more meaningful because you are no longer operating from a place of fear or scarcity. You have the mental and emotional space to offer grace, empathy, and understanding. People notice this change even if they cannot articulate it. Your presence becomes calming to those around you, not because you are perfect, but because your peace is rooted in something unshakable. Another way this peace manifests is through your ability to face uncertainty. Life is unpredictable and challenges will inevitably arise. But when God is first, you approach uncertainty differently. You are less likely to be paralyzed by fear or overwhelmed by doubt. Instead, you find yourself moving forward with quiet confidence. You understand that while you cannot control every outcome, you can control your trust and your response. This does not mean you never feel anxious or unsettled, but those moments are shorter, less consuming, and easier to navigate. Peace becomes a default mode because it is anchored in faith, not circumstance. Daily routines take on a new rhythm when peace becomes your default mode. Morning chaos that once set a tense tone for the day no longer has the same grip on you. Decisions about work, family, or personal projects are made with a steadier mind. Even in the midst of deadlines or pressure, you find yourself approaching tasks calmly and efficiently. This does not mean that life suddenly becomes effortless. Responsibilities remain, Challenges persist, and emotions still surface. But there is a foundation beneath it all that does not waver. Your focus is clear, your mind is steady, and your heart is at rest. Peace also transforms your perspective on failure and setbacks. When God is first, mistakes and disappointments no longer feel like catastrophic events. Instead, they are part of a larger journey. You begin to see setbacks as lessons, opportunities for growth, and ways to refine your character and faith. Your emotional response to adversity changes because your peace is not dependent on constant success or external approval. This makes resilience feel natural rather than forced. Challenges become manageable because they are approached from a place of confidence in God's guidance rather than self-reliance. Another remarkable effect is how this peace impacts your decision-making. When your mind and heart are calm, you can think clearly and act wisely. Impulsive choices driven by stress, fear, or external pressure become rare. Instead, you respond thoughtfully and intentionally, weighing actions with discernment and insight. This clarity extends to all areas of life: relationships, career, finances, and personal growth. The decisions you make reflect your values and priorities rather than reactive impulses. Peace allows for space to breathe, reflect, and make choices that align with your purpose and calling. Even in moments of conflict or high tension, this peace remains a stabilizing force. Arguments that once escalated quickly are now handled with composure and understanding. Stressful situations are met with steady confidence. You find yourself more able to listen, empathize, and seek resolution instead of reacting defensively. The presence of God in your life creates a foundation that does not crumble when circumstances are challenging. It is this consistency that makes peace a default mode rather than a fleeting experience. Spiritual practices like prayer, meditation, and reflection amplify this sense of calm. When you spend time connecting with God, your mind and heart are reminded of the bigger picture. You gain perspective, feel supported, and experience reassurance that you are not alone. These moments of connection become touchstones throughout your day, reinforcing peace and stability. Even brief pauses to pray or reflect can reset your emotional and mental state, allowing calm to return quickly and naturally. Ultimately, peace becomes effortless because it is not something you manufacture on your own. It is a byproduct of prioritizing God and allowing His presence to guide your heart and mind. Your focus shifts from fear, control, and scarcity to trust, purpose, and abundance. Life still brings challenges, unexpected changes, and moments of discomfort, but your response is anchored in a sense of security that cannot be shaken by temporary circumstances. Your heart begins to move naturally toward calm, your mind becomes steadier, and your energy is spent on what truly matters rather than being drained by constant worry. When peace becomes your default mode, it transforms not only your inner life, but also the world around you. You approach each day with a steady presence, handle challenges with clarity, and inspire confidence and calm in others. Life does not become perfect, but it becomes manageable, meaningful, and even enjoyable. Stress loses its power over you, decisions are made with confidence, and setbacks no longer define your emotional state. You begin to live in a rhythm of calm that is both sustainable and deeply fulfilling. In the end, putting God first does more than bring occasional moments of relief. It cultivates a peace that becomes your default state. This peace is rooted in trust, strengthened by perspective, and expressed through calm action. It is present in your mind, heart, and interactions with the world. When life feels overwhelming, when challenges arise, or when uncertainty looms, you are no longer carried away by panic or anxiety. Instead, You move through life with a steady heart, a clear mind, and a confidence grounded in faith. Peace becomes natural, automatic, and transformative, shaping every choice, every interaction, and every moment. This is the beauty of putting God first. Number 3, opportunities start showing up differently. When you put God first, life begins to feel like it is moving on a completely different wavelength. One of the most exciting ways this manifests is through opportunities, not the random, luck-based opportunities that sometimes come and go, but doors opening in ways that seem intentional and perfectly timed. Before prioritizing God, you might notice opportunities as rare flashes, things that require luck, connections, or just being in the right place at the right time. You may have chased opportunities that promised success, recognition, or financial gain, only to realize they didn't align with your purpose or values. But when God becomes first, you begin to see opportunities in a new light. They start showing up in alignment with your calling, timing, and preparation. They feel less like coincidences and more like divine invitations that you are ready for. The first thing you notice is how your perspective changes. Before, you might have been looking at opportunities through the lens of scarcity, always fearing you would miss out, or constantly comparing yourself to others who seemed to have it all. You might have felt frustrated when doors closed, or anxious when the next step wasn't clear. When God is first, that fear and pressure begin to fade. You start to trust that the right opportunities will come at the right time. Your focus shifts from grasping every possible option to recognizing which paths are truly meant for you. This doesn't mean you stop working or striving, but your effort is guided rather than frantic. You begin to discern which opportunities align with God's plan and which are distractions that pull you away from your purpose. Another shift is how you respond when opportunities appear. Before, you may have hesitated, doubted your abilities, or overanalyzed the risk. You might have worried about failing, about being judged, or about whether you were truly ready. When God is first, there is a quiet confidence that begins to emerge. You start to take steps with faith rather than fear. You are more willing to embrace challenges and say yes to things that stretch you because your trust is anchored in God rather than in your own strength or timing. This confidence does not come from arrogance or certainty about outcomes. It comes from the assurance that you are moving with divine guidance and that your efforts are part of a bigger picture that you cannot fully see yet. You also begin to notice opportunities in unexpected places. Before, you might have only looked for opportunities in traditional or obvious ways, through career advancement, networking, or visible achievements. Now, opportunities can appear in conversations, casual encounters, or moments that previously seemed insignificant. A chance meeting could lead to mentorship. A small project could turn into a major breakthrough, or a problem could open a door to innovation you never considered. When God is first, your eyes are open to recognize these moments. You start to see patterns, connections, and possibilities that you previously overlooked. What once seemed like ordinary events now carry potential for growth, impact, or purpose. Timing also begins to feel different. When you prioritize God, you notice that doors open exactly when they are supposed to, not necessarily when you want them to. This is one of the most subtle and profound changes. Before, you may have rushed, pushed, or forced things to happen according to your own timeline, only to feel disappointment when the results didn't meet your expectations. Now, there is a rhythm to life that feels aligned. Opportunities appear in perfect sequence with preparation, experience, and readiness. You start to trust that closed doors are not rejections, but redirections, and open doors are invitations to step into something that fits your life and calling. This sense of divine timing reduces stress and increases clarity, allowing you to act with purpose rather than desperation. Another aspect of this shift is how relationships play a role in opportunities. Before putting God first, networking and connections may have felt transactional or intimidating. You might have pursued people solely for personal gain or struggled to know how to approach collaboration. When God becomes the priority, relationships take on a new depth and meaning. You attract people who resonate with your purpose, who encourage your growth, and who bring opportunities naturally through mutual alignment rather than manipulation or hustle. These relationships feel effortless and organic because they are rooted in shared values and divine timing. Opportunities arise as a natural byproduct of the life you are living, not as something forced or coerced. Your approach to risk and challenge also changes. Opportunities often come with uncertainty or the potential for failure, and before prioritizing God, this uncertainty can be paralyzing. You might have avoided chances because you were afraid of what could go wrong, focusing on worst-case scenarios rather than potential outcomes. When God is first, fear is still present, but it no longer dominates your decisions. You begin to act with courage because your trust is in God's wisdom and provision rather than solely your own planning or abilities. You take steps that stretch you, that push you into growth, and that create space for new possibilities that you would never have imagined on your own. One of the most exciting outcomes is the alignment between preparation and opportunity. Before putting God first, you might have felt like your efforts were scattered or that timing never seemed to work in your favor. Now your preparation starts to meet opportunity in a way that feels orchestrated. Skills, experiences, and lessons you have gained over time converge at just the right moment, allowing you to step confidently into new roles, projects, or ventures. This alignment feels like more than coincidence. It feels like life is finally moving in the direction it was always meant to go, guided by a higher plan that you are now part of. Even everyday moments begin to carry potential. Opportunities are no longer just big, life-changing events. They become embedded in daily life. A conversation with a coworker can spark a new idea. A challenge at home or work can become a platform for learning and growth. A seemingly small decision can open doors that have long-term impact. When God is first, your perception shifts. You begin to notice these moments and seize them with confidence because you trust that they are part of a bigger design. Your ability to recognize and act on opportunities increases, and what once felt random now feels purposeful. Ultimately, when opportunities start showing up differently, your life begins to feel more alive, purposeful, and aligned. You are no longer drifting through chance encounters or hoping for the right moment to come along. Doors open in sync with your preparation, timing, and purpose. You step into challenges with confidence, recognizing that God is guiding your steps. You notice potential where others see obstacles. Relationships and networks form naturally around shared values and alignment with God's plan. Your perception, trust, and willingness to act combine to create a life where opportunity flows, not because of luck or force, but because of intentional focus on what matters most. When God is first, opportunities are no longer something you chase desperately. They become part of a rhythm of life that feels natural, intentional, and full of purpose. Life does not suddenly become easy, but it begins to unfold in a way that makes sense, that feels guided, and that aligns with your highest calling. What once felt random or elusive now arrives in perfect timing, shaped by faith, preparation, and trust. Opportunities start showing up differently because your perspective, heart, and actions are aligned with God, and when that alignment happens, doors open that you never even imagined, paths become clear, and your life begins to move in a direction that feels intentional, exciting, and unstoppable. Number 4. Relationships transform. When you put God first, one of the most profound changes you will notice is in your relationships. Not just romantic relationships or friendships, but every connection you have with the people around you. Life begins to feel different because your interactions are no longer driven by fear, expectation, or selfish desire. Instead, they start to reflect a heart that is aligned with God, and that alignment changes everything. People respond differently to you, and you respond differently to them. There is a natural depth and authenticity that begins to grow in your interactions, and the quality of your relationships improves in ways that feel effortless yet intentional. Before prioritizing God, relationships can often feel like a source of stress or obligation. You may have found yourself frustrated with others, easily offended, or constantly trying to manage impressions and expectations. You might have been drawn to people for the wrong reasons, seeking approval, validation, or control. When your focus is on yourself, it is easy for relationships to become transactional, shallow, or draining. Even with people you care about, conflict and misunderstanding can feel overwhelming because your perspective is limited by your own desires and insecurities. This is not intentional. It is simply the natural result of a heart that is not centered on God. When God becomes first, your approach to relationships shifts naturally. You begin to see people through a different lens, one that prioritizes love, empathy, and understanding over control or self-interest. You start to recognize the value of each person, not for what they can give you or how they make you feel, but for who they are and how you can positively impact their life. Your interactions become less reactive and more intentional. You respond with patience when someone frustrates you instead of immediately reacting. You forgive more easily because your heart is anchored in grace. You listen more attentively because you are no longer distracted by your own need to be heard. This shift also affects the kinds of people you attract and keep in your life. When God is first, you begin to notice who truly aligns with your values, your purpose, and your calling. Toxic relationships that once drained your energy no longer hold the same power over you. You naturally distance yourself from negative influences, not out of judgment or pride, but because your heart is drawn toward connection and growth that reflects God's design. At the same time, you attract relationships that are supportive, encouraging, and mutually beneficial. These are the people who challenge you in positive ways, inspire your faith, and walk alongside you in your journey. The way you communicate also changes. Conversations become richer because your heart is calm and focused. You are less likely to speak out of fear, defensiveness, or impatience. Instead, you engage in dialogue with intention, seeking to understand and to contribute positively. Even difficult conversations take on a different quality. You are able to navigate disagreements without allowing anger, pride, or frustration to dominate. Your presence alone can become a source of peace for others because it reflects the steady foundation of your relationship with God. Putting God first also deepens your capacity for empathy and compassion. You begin to care more genuinely about the needs, struggles, and successes of others. You notice things you may have overlooked before, small acts of kindness, moments of vulnerability, or unspoken challenges. Your responses are guided by love rather than obligation. You begin to serve, encourage, and support in ways that feel natural and fulfilling, not forced or performative. Relationships no longer feel like a burden or a source of stress, but as opportunities to reflect God's character and to cultivate meaningful connections. Another powerful transformation occurs in the way you handle conflict. Before prioritizing God, conflicts can feel like threats. Disagreements often escalate quickly, and emotions can take over, leading to frustration, resentment, or withdrawal. When God is first, your approach to conflict is rooted in perspective and patience. You are able to step back, see the bigger picture, and respond in a way that promotes resolution and understanding rather than division. You recognize that every interaction is an opportunity to grow in character and wisdom. Even when relationships are tested, the foundation of God-centered priorities allows you to navigate challenges with grace and clarity. Romantic relationships are particularly impacted when God is first. When your heart is anchored in God, you approach love differently. You are less likely to settle for relationships that are convenient, unhealthy, or misaligned with your purpose. Instead, you are drawn to partnerships that reflect mutual respect, shared values, and a commitment to growth. You invest in the relationship with intention, prioritizing communication, trust, and spiritual alignment. You also gain clarity about boundaries, expectations, and the qualities that matter most in a partner. Love becomes less about fulfillment of desire and more about mutual growth, respect, and shared purpose. Family dynamics also begin to improve. When God is first, you gain patience, understanding, and perspective that can change long-standing patterns of tension or misunderstanding. You are able to approach family relationships with grace, forgiveness, and intention. The natural frustrations of living with others do not disappear, but your response to them is transformed. You are able to create space for connection, reconciliation, and meaningful interaction. Your presence in family relationships becomes a source of calm and encouragement rather than conflict and stress. Friendships deepen in ways that feel effortless yet meaningful. You are drawn to people who encourage your faith and growth while also being able to support and uplift them in return. Superficial connections fall away naturally, and authentic friendships take their place. Conversations are filled with substance, shared experiences, and mutual understanding. You are no longer measuring your worth by approval or attention, and this freedom allows you to engage fully with others. Trust and loyalty become the foundation of your social interactions, and these qualities draw people to you in genuine ways. Even in professional relationships, the transformation is evident. When God is first, your work interactions are influenced by integrity, respect, and intentionality. You communicate clearly, collaborate effectively, and respond to challenges with calm confidence rather than stress or competitiveness. Colleagues notice the difference because your presence is consistent, reliable, and rooted in a perspective that transcends self-interest. Opportunities for mentorship, collaboration, and leadership naturally arise because your relationships are built on trust, alignment, and authentic connection rather than manipulation or networking tactics. Ultimately, the transformation of relationships begins with a change in your heart. When God is first, your love becomes more selfless, your patience more abundant, and your presence more intentional. Relationships no longer drain your energy or define your worth. Instead, they become opportunities to reflect God's character, to grow in understanding, and to build connections that are meaningful, lasting, and mutually beneficial. You interact with the world differently, and the people around you respond in kind. In the end, putting God first transforms relationships in ways that feel effortless yet profound. Your interactions are guided by perspective, love, and intention rather than fear, control, or expectation. You attract people who align with your purpose, navigate conflict with grace, and invest in connections that truly matter. Family, friendships, romantic partnerships, and professional relationships all begin to reflect a higher standard of connection and meaning. Life feels richer because every interaction carries the potential for growth, understanding, and joy. Relationships transform because your heart is transformed, and when God is first, connection becomes natural, authentic, and life-giving in ways that you never imagined. Number 5, your faith turns into action. When you put God first, your faith stops being something abstract or theoretical. It stops being a set of beliefs you carry in your mind or quietly repeat in prayer. Your faith begins to manifest in action. It starts to influence the decisions you make, the way you treat others, and the goals you pursue. Faith no longer lives only in your thoughts. It lives in your choices, your priorities, and the way you move through life. It becomes visible in your everyday behavior because your relationship with God is no longer passive. This is one of the most profound and rewarding changes that happens when God takes the first place in your heart. Before prioritizing God, it is easy for faith to remain dormant. You may attend services, read scripture, or pray, but when it comes to daily life, faith can feel disconnected from reality. Decisions are often guided by fear, doubt, or convenience rather than trust in God's guidance. You may hope for change, blessings, or breakthroughs, yet struggle to take the steps that align with your beliefs. Your faith is sincere, but it is often trapped in thought and intention rather than expressed through tangible action. When God becomes your priority, that changes. Your faith becomes practical. It moves from internal conviction to external expression, shaping the way you live, work, and interact with the world. One of the first ways this transformation is evident is in decision-making. When God is first, your choices are influenced by values and principles rather than impulses or societal pressures. You start considering what aligns with God's will and purpose in every situation. This does not mean you are perfect or never make mistakes, but it means your decisions are intentional, guided by faith rather than fear. You begin to take actions that reflect trust in God, even when the outcome is uncertain. Opportunities that once felt risky are now approached with confidence because your faith informs your courage. You move forward knowing that the steps you take matter not only in the present, but also in the fulfillment of a larger plan. Putting God first also brings clarity in priorities. When your focus is on Him, you can see where your time, energy, and resources are best invested. Faith turns into action because you are no longer scattered by distractions or caught up in pursuits that do not matter. You naturally prioritize what is meaningful, whether that involves your career, relationships, personal growth, or service to others. Your actions begin to reflect your beliefs consistently, creating harmony between what you say you value and how you live. This alignment strengthens your faith because it is reinforced through experience and results. When you act on faith, you witness the ways God moves in response, and this cycle builds momentum in your life. Service is another area where faith begins to take shape. When God is first, you naturally become more attuned to the needs of others. Acts of kindness, encouragement, and support become expressions of your faith. Helping someone in need, offering a listening ear, or providing guidance are no longer optional or occasional. They become part of the rhythm of life because your heart is aligned with God's. You begin to recognize that faith is not just about receiving blessings, but also about being a conduit for them. Your actions reflect a living faith, one that creates tangible impact in the lives of others and demonstrates love, compassion, and integrity. Faith also turns into action in the way you pursue goals and overcome challenges. When God is first, fear and doubt lose their power over you. You are willing to step out of comfort zones, take calculated risks, and pursue opportunities that require courage and persistence. Your actions are no longer solely motivated by personal gain or recognition. Instead, they are informed by purpose, calling, and trust in God's guidance. Challenges that once felt overwhelming are approached with resilience because your faith gives you strength beyond your own abilities. You begin to move forward even when outcomes are uncertain because you know that God's presence and wisdom are with you in every step. Consistency becomes another defining feature of faith in action. When God is first, small, daily acts of obedience and integrity accumulate to create meaningful change over time. Faith is expressed not just in big, dramatic decisions, but in the way you treat others, the diligence you bring to your work, and the care with which you manage responsibilities. The habits you develop, guided by faith, build character and momentum. Opportunities, relationships, and personal growth begin to align with your values because your actions are consistent, intentional, and rooted in a God-centered perspective. Courage and perseverance are naturally strengthened as faith turns into action. Life is full of uncertainty, setbacks, and obstacles, and it is easy to feel discouraged when relying solely on human effort. When God is first, your faith motivates you to persevere despite difficulties. You are willing to take risks, try new approaches, and keep moving forward even when the path is unclear. Your actions reflect trust in God's timing and provision rather than impatience or desperation. This steadfastness inspires others and opens doors that might otherwise remain closed. When faith becomes active, it creates momentum that carries you through challenges while keeping you aligned with purpose. Faith in action also changes the way you approach influence and leadership. When God is first, your example becomes a powerful form of testimony. The way you handle decisions, setbacks, and relationships demonstrates principles that go beyond words. People notice your integrity, courage, and intentionality. They see a life guided by purpose and faith, and it naturally draws them to reflect on their own choices. Leadership rooted in faith is not about control or authority. It is about inspiring, guiding, and serving others through the consistency of your actions and the authenticity of your commitment. Your faith begins to impact not only your personal life, but also your broader community. Another powerful effect is the alignment between vision and action. When God is first, your dreams and goals start to reflect divine priorities rather than personal ambition alone. Faith provides clarity and courage to pursue what matters most, even when it seems daunting or unconventional. You begin to take intentional steps toward growth, contribution, and purpose. Every action becomes a way to express trust, obedience, and hope. This alignment transforms the way you experience progress. Success is no longer measured solely by external markers, but by the alignment of your choices with your calling and the visible impact of your faith in the world. Faith turning into action also enhances personal growth. Challenges, mistakes, and setbacks are no longer just obstacles. They become opportunities to exercise faith and learn from experience. You become more resilient, adaptable, and intentional. Each step you take in alignment with God strengthens your confidence, sharpens your wisdom, and deepens your understanding of your purpose. You learn to trust in the process, to see growth in progress, and to recognize the cumulative effect of consistent, faith-driven action. Ultimately, putting God first ensures that your faith does not remain stagnant. It becomes a living, breathing force that guides every aspect of your life. Your decisions, priorities, relationships, service, goals, and personal growth are all touched by the active presence of faith. You stop waiting for external validation or perfect conditions. Instead, you step forward with trust, knowing that your actions, grounded in God, are meaningful and aligned with a higher plan. Faith stops being theoretical and becomes practical, visible, and transformative. When your faith turns into action, life begins to feel purposeful, intentional, and alive. You no longer drift aimlessly or react passively to circumstances. You move with confidence, guided by principle, trust, and divine alignment. Opportunities are pursued with courage, relationships are deepened with care, challenges are met with resilience, and growth becomes natural. The impact of your faith extends beyond your own life, influencing those around you and creating a ripple effect of positive change. Action and faith become inseparable, and living with God first ensures that your faith is never idle, never theoretical, and never powerless. This is the ultimate reward of putting God first. Your faith no longer resides only in thought or prayer. It becomes a force that shapes your reality, inspires others, and transforms your life. You step into a rhythm of purpose where every decision, interaction, and effort is infused with meaning and guided by God's presence. Life becomes a canvas where faith is expressed through action, and action reflects the depth of faith. When God is first, your faith is alive, active, and unstoppable, turning belief into reality in ways that are both tangible and extraordinary. Dearly beloved, when you put God first, your entire perspective on failure begins to shift. Failure, which once felt like the end of the world, the measure of your worth, or proof that you weren't enough, starts to take on a new meaning. It is no longer something to fear, avoid, or obsess over. Instead, failure becomes a teacher, a guide, and a stepping stone. It becomes part of a larger journey, one that is shaped by purpose, growth, and trust in God's timing. The moment you start trusting God, you begin to see that failure is not a verdict, but a tool, a way for life to realign you, strengthen you, and prepare you for what is ahead. Before prioritizing God, failure can feel crushing. When things go wrong, you internalize it, replay mistakes in your mind, and let the weight of disappointment define your self-worth. You measure yourself by results, outcomes, or the opinions of others. A failed project, a broken relationship, a missed opportunity, or a rejection can feel like a permanent mark of inadequacy. Fear of failure dictates decisions. You avoid risks, second-guess your choices, and settle for less than what you are capable of because the potential for falling short seems unbearable. This fear keeps you trapped in cycles of hesitation, regret, and stagnation. It limits your vision and stops you from stepping into the fullness of what God intends for your life. When God becomes first, everything changes. You begin to see failure through the lens of faith rather than fear. Trusting God means understanding that setbacks are not random or punitive. They are part of a larger plan that you may not yet understand. When you trust Him, you realize that failure does not define you. It refines you. It is an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to cultivate resilience. Your worth is no longer tied to success or external validation. You start to understand that God's approval, not worldly outcomes, is the measure of your value and purpose. This perspective alone is liberating. It allows you to approach challenges with confidence, knowing that even if things do not go as planned, you are still on the right path. Trusting God also shifts the way you interpret mistakes. A failed attempt is no longer proof that you lack ability or intelligence. Instead, it becomes a signpost pointing to lessons you need to learn, preparation you need to gain, or wisdom you need to acquire. You begin to ask different questions. What is this teaching me? How can I grow from this experience? What is God showing me through this moment? These questions replace self-criticism and fear with curiosity, insight, and humility. You see failure not as a destination, but as a momentary stop on a journey of growth and discovery. One of the most important changes is how trust in God affects your response to disappointment. Before, failure often led to frustration, anger, or despair. You might have blamed yourself, others, or circumstances. You might have retreated into fear or avoidance. Trusting God allows you to respond differently. You begin to see disappointment as temporary and meaningful rather than permanent and punitive. You find calm in the midst of uncertainty because you know that God is at work, even when results are not what you expected. This does not make disappointment disappear, but it changes how you experience it. Instead of being paralyzed by failure, you are motivated to analyze, adapt, and move forward with renewed perspective. Trusting God also changes your relationship with risk. Before faith, failure feels like a warning. Don't try, don't stretch, don't risk. Fear dominates your decisions. When God is first, risk is approached differently. You are willing to step into challenges that once seemed too intimidating because you trust that your steps are guided and that failure is not final. You take action because your motivation is not fear avoidance, but faith-driven purpose. Risk becomes an opportunity rather than a threat. You begin to understand that the greatest growth often comes from the experiences that challenge you most, and that God's hand can turn setbacks into preparation for something greater than you imagined. Your perspective on timing also transforms. Many failures feel worse because we expect immediate results. When God is first, you begin to see that timing is not always under your control. What seems like failure in the moment may be a necessary delay, a preparation, or a redirection. You learn to be patient, to trust in God's timing, and to recognize that short-term setbacks can create long-term advantage. This shift changes how you evaluate success and failure. A closed door is no longer a rejection. It is a course correction. A missed opportunity is not wasted time. It is a season of preparation. You stop rushing, forcing, or fearing, and start moving with intention and trust. Trusting God also transforms the emotional impact of failure. Before, setbacks often triggered shame, guilt, or anxiety. You relived mistakes, worried about judgment, and felt stuck in cycles of negativity. When you trust God, your emotional response becomes healthier and more grounded. You can acknowledge mistakes without letting them define you. You can feel disappointment without letting it spiral into despair. Your faith provides a secure foundation, a reminder that you are more than your failures, and that every experience, good or bad, can be used for growth and purpose. This emotional stability allows you to move forward more quickly, adapt more effectively, and maintain confidence in your abilities. Another profound shift is in perspective on comparison. Before trusting God, failure is often magnified by looking at others. You measure yourself against achievements, progress, or milestones that may not even be relevant to your journey. This creates unnecessary pressure, fear, and self-criticism. Trusting God refocuses your attention on your path and purpose. You begin to see that your journey is unique and that setbacks are part of your specific story. You stop comparing your failures or successes to others and start evaluating your life by alignment with your calling, values, and God's guidance. This shift brings freedom from insecurity and encourages a mindset of growth rather than judgment. Faith also changes how you deal with repeated failure. When attempts do not succeed, it is easy to feel like the pattern defines you. Before putting God first, repeated setbacks can create discouragement, doubt, and even the temptation to quit. Trusting God changes this. You begin to see repeated failures not as proof of inadequacy, but as evidence of effort, persistence, and learning. You understand that growth often requires multiple attempts, and that each effort brings experience, insight, and preparation. This perspective instills perseverance, patience, and resilience. You continue to act, try, and improve because your trust is in God's purpose, not in immediate perfection. Failure also becomes a tool for humility. Before, success might have been a measure of pride, and failure a measure of shame. Trusting God allows you to recognize that your life is not solely under your control and that mistakes are natural and necessary for growth. You begin to embrace humility, acknowledging both your limitations and your dependence on God's guidance. This humility is liberating because it reduces the weight of self-criticism and allows for openness to learning, mentorship, and correction. You no longer need to prove yourself at every turn. Instead, you focus on faith-driven growth and alignment with God's purpose. Trusting God also helps you see failure as an opportunity for redirection. What appears to be a dead end may be a nudge toward a better path, a new approach, or a previously unseen opportunity. You start to interpret setbacks not as endings, but as signals to pause, adjust, and redirect energy towards something more aligned with God's plan. This perspective reduces frustration and regret. It replaces despair with hope and curiosity. Every setback becomes a chance to reassess, refine strategy, and act with intention. Failure is no longer a stop sign, it is a guidepost. Your creativity and problem-solving also improve when failure is viewed through the lens of faith. Fear of failure often limits imagination and experimentation. When God is first, setbacks are seen as opportunities to innovate, adapt, and grow. You are willing to explore different approaches, learn new skills, and take unconventional paths because your focus is on growth and purpose, not avoiding mistakes. This mindset encourages resilience, resourcefulness, and flexibility. Failure becomes part of a learning process, and each experience adds tools, wisdom, and perspective for future challenges. Trusting God also changes your perspective on criticism and feedback. Before, criticism can feel like confirmation of failure, triggering defensiveness or discouragement. When God is first, feedback becomes a gift rather than a threat. You learn to evaluate input objectively, discern value, and apply lessons without internalizing negativity. Your faith allows you to separate external judgment from self-worth. Constructive feedback is embraced as a tool for growth, while unhelpful criticism is acknowledged but not internalized. This shift enhances resilience, self-awareness, and adaptability. Ultimately, trusting God transforms failure into a powerful ally rather than an enemy. You begin to understand that failure is inevitable, but its impact depends on your perspective. When God is first, failure becomes part of a journey of growth, preparation, and purpose. You see mistakes as teachers, setbacks as guides, and disappointment as a temporary moment with long-term value. Fear is replaced by courage, despair by hope, and hesitation by action. Your decisions are informed by faith rather than fear, and every step you take, even through failure, brings you closer to your calling. When you fully embrace this perspective, life changes. You move with confidence, knowing that setbacks are not the end, but a natural part of growth. You are willing to act, innovate, and stretch beyond comfort zones because failure no longer intimidates you. Relationships improve because trust and humility guide interactions. Opportunities are pursued without fear because you understand that even if you stumble, you are guided by God's plan. Your mindset shifts from scarcity and fear to abundance and courage. Each failure becomes a stepping stone rather than a stumbling block, and your faith grows stronger as it is proven in action. In the end, trusting God changes your perspective on failure completely. What once seemed like proof of inadequacy becomes a tool for refinement. What once brought fear and hesitation becomes a catalyst for courage and growth. You stop seeing yourself as defined by results and start seeing yourself as defined by faith, purpose, and resilience. Life becomes a journey where every setback has meaning, every mistake has value, and every challenge contributes to a bigger story that God is writing. Failure is no longer the enemy. It is a companion, a teacher, and a guide that helps you move closer to the life and purpose God intended for you. This is the ultimate freedom of putting God first. Your perspective transforms, your fear diminishes, and your confidence grows. You embrace challenges with courage, approach setbacks with wisdom, and navigate life with faith that transcends results. Trusting God turns failure from something to dread into something to embrace. It becomes part of a dynamic, purposeful, and faith-driven life where each misstep is not an endpoint, but a step forward, each disappointment a lesson, and each obstacle a platform for growth. Life is no longer measured by avoidance of failure, but by how faithfully you act, learn, and trust through it. When you put God first, your life begins to move in a rhythm that is different from the one you were used to. Things start happening in a sequence that feels intentional, purposeful, and aligned with your higher calling. What used to feel random, rushed, or out of your control begins to fall into place naturally. Opportunities appear at the right moment, relationships develop in alignment with your growth, and decisions that once seemed complicated or overwhelming become clear. This is what it means to experience divine timing, and it is one of the most powerful benefits of living with God at the center of your life. Before putting God first, timing often feels like a constant source of frustration. You might chase opportunities, rush decisions, and feel anxious when results are delayed. You may have experienced moments when you thought you were ready, only to face setbacks that felt unfair or unexplainable. Life seems unpredictable, and outcomes often feel disconnected from effort, preparation, or intention. This can lead to stress, impatience, and even discouragement. You might try to force things to happen on your schedule, believing that speed, planning, or control is the key to success. But forcing timing rarely works. It creates tension, mistakes, and missed opportunities. When God is first, your perspective on timing changes completely. You start to understand that there is a season for everything, a moment for every opportunity, and a path that is unique to your life. You begin to trust that doors will open at the right time, not necessarily the time you want. You recognize that delays, detours, and unexpected changes are not obstacles, but part of a divine orchestration that is working in your favor. This shift brings an incredible sense of peace because you no longer feel like you have to control every outcome. You begin to operate from a place of trust rather than fear. One of the reasons God-first living attracts divine timing is because it aligns your heart and priorities with His plan. When God is your focus, you naturally make decisions that are in harmony with your purpose rather than influenced by external pressure or fleeting desires. Your actions become intentional, and your energy is directed toward what truly matters. This alignment means that when opportunities appear, you are prepared, ready, and able to recognize and seize them. Divine timing is not random. It responds to readiness, faith, and obedience. Living with God first ensures that your life is in sync with the flow of His plan, which allows opportunities to present themselves exactly when they are most beneficial and effective. Trusting God also changes your relationship with patience. Before, waiting often felt frustrating, unproductive, or even hopeless. You might have seen delays as signs of failure or lack of progress. God-first living reframes waiting as a period of preparation. You begin to understand that what seems like a pause is actually a time to grow, strengthen, and equip yourself for what is ahead. Skills, experiences, relationships, and understanding accumulate during this time so that when the moment arrives, you are ready to step in with confidence and clarity. Patience becomes active rather than passive. It is not about idleness, but about trust, preparation, and awareness of God's timing. Another way God-first living attracts divine timing is by clearing distractions and aligning your focus. When God is central in your life, your priorities become clear, and your actions begin to reflect intentionality rather than reaction. You stop wasting energy on pursuits that do not matter or on paths that are misaligned with your calling. This focus creates space for what is truly meaningful to arrive at the right time. Opportunities that once might have been overlooked become visible, and you are able to act decisively when the moment comes. Divine timing is not just about external circumstances, it is about internal alignment that allows you to recognize and step into the right moments. Living with God first also transforms the way you respond to setbacks and delays. Before prioritizing God, challenges can feel like interruptions or evidence that you are off track. You might have questioned yourself, others, or even your direction. God-first living reframes setbacks as part of the process. You learn to see them as guidance, redirection, or preparation. Even when circumstances are not ideal, you trust that there is a reason, a lesson, and a purpose behind the timing. This trust allows you to remain confident, calm, and steady, even when external events do not make immediate sense. It also opens your heart to opportunities that might be disguised as obstacles, recognizing that divine timing often works in unexpected ways. Relationships also operate differently when God is first. People come into your life at the right time to provide mentorship, support, or partnership. Romantic, professional, and social connections develop with greater authenticity and alignment. You attract relationships that are in sync with your purpose, and those connections arrive at moments when they can have the greatest positive impact. Timing becomes evident in the quality and depth of the interactions you experience. You no longer have to force connections, chase validation, or settle for relationships that drain your energy. Divine timing brings the right people into your life at the exact moment they are meant to play a role in your journey. Divine timing also affects opportunities and career paths. Before prioritizing God, success can feel elusive, unpredictable, or dependent on luck and timing that seems out of your control. When God is first, you begin to recognize that preparation, readiness, and alignment attract opportunities naturally. The steps you take, the skills you develop, and the integrity you maintain position you for breakthroughs that arrive precisely when they are meant to. Opportunities that align with your calling, talents, and preparation become apparent, and you are able to act without hesitation or doubt. The results often appear effortless because they are in harmony with the timing that God has designed for your life. Faith and trust play a critical role in recognizing divine timing. When God is first, you start to see beyond immediate appearances and trust that there is a larger pattern at work. Even when delays, setbacks, or unexpected changes occur, you understand that these moments are part of a sequence that is leading to something greater. You stop panicking when results do not come instantly and instead focus on the process, preparation, and alignment. Trust allows you to act with confidence and patience, knowing that God's timing is perfect, even when it differs from your own expectations. Living God first also transforms how you approach decisions. When you prioritize Him, decisions become less about fear, urgency, or pressure, and more about alignment with your purpose and values. Divine timing works in tandem with wisdom and discernment. You are less likely to make impulsive choices or rush into opportunities that are not meant for you. Instead, you develop clarity about when to act, when to wait, and when to trust the unfolding process. This discernment ensures that your actions are in sync with God's plan, which naturally attracts the right timing for each opportunity, encounter, or decision. The spiritual dimension of divine timing becomes more evident when God is first. You begin to notice patterns, coincidences, and synchronicities that point toward intentionality beyond your own control. Moments that might have seemed random or trivial now appear as markers guiding your path. You recognize that preparation, prayer, and obedience attract circumstances and people in alignment with your journey. This awareness strengthens faith, deepens trust, and enhances patience, allowing you to navigate life with confidence and clarity. Even challenges become part of divine timing. When God is first, obstacles are no longer purely setbacks. They are integral to your preparation and growth. Difficult experiences, failures, and delays shape character, resilience, and perspective, ensuring that when the right moment arrives, you are equipped to handle it. Divine timing works in such a way that preparation meets opportunity, readiness meets circumstance, and purpose meets action. Life no longer feels chaotic or accidental. Instead, it carries a sense of flow, rhythm, and intention that is unmistakable. The cumulative effect of God-first living is a life where timing becomes less about stress and more about alignment. You no longer feel pressure to force outcomes or control every situation. Instead, you act intentionally, stay prepared, and trust the sequence of events that is unfolding. This rhythm creates space for creativity, clarity, and decisive action. You notice that doors open when you are ready, relationships deepen when trust and alignment are present, and opportunities arrive with greater ease and clarity. Divine timing becomes a natural consequence of living in sync with God's priorities, rather than a distant, unpredictable phenomenon. Living with God first also transforms your response to delays that previously caused frustration. When things do not happen on your timeline, you begin to interpret the pause as an opportunity rather than a setback. You can reflect, grow, and refine your approach. You can gain wisdom, strengthen skills, and build patience. Each delay becomes a period of intentional preparation rather than wasted time. Divine timing works not in spite of waiting, but through it. Trusting God allows you to see that what appears slow or inconvenient is often exactly what you need to grow into the moment that is meant for you. Faith in action is another component of attracting divine timing. When God is first, your actions are guided by intention and alignment rather than impulse. You move forward with purpose, trust, and preparation. Each step you take creates readiness for what is coming, and divine timing works in response to that readiness. Opportunities, encounters, and breakthroughs appear at the right time because your life is aligned with God's plan. You are no longer passively hoping for good timing. You are actively living in a way that naturally draws the right moments toward you. Ultimately, God-first living ensures that timing is not just about coincidence or chance. It is about alignment, preparation, trust, and action. When you prioritize Him, life begins to unfold in a rhythm that is consistent, intentional, and deeply satisfying. Opportunities, relationships, and decisions arrive at the right moment because your life is synchronized with God's plan. You move with clarity, confidence, and peace, knowing that every step, pause, and encounter is purposeful. Divine timing becomes a lived reality, not a theory, because your heart, mind, and actions are aligned with the source of all timing itself. Putting God first transforms every aspect of your life, creating conditions where divine timing naturally operates. You are no longer desperate for results or anxious about outcomes. You act with intentionality, live with patience, and trust in the unfolding plan. Challenges, delays, and setbacks become part of preparation rather than threats. Opportunities appear precisely when you are ready, and relationships develop in ways that align with your growth. Life begins to feel orchestrated, purposeful, and seamless, because your focus is on God rather than forcing circumstances to meet your timeline. When you fully embrace God-first living, you notice the subtle ways divine timing works. A conversation occurs at the right moment to guide a decision. A setback reveals a better path than the one you were pursuing. A missed opportunity turns out to have been a blessing in disguise. Relationships form, dissolve, or deepen exactly when needed. Opportunities appear in alignment with your readiness. Every experience, action, and encounter begins to feel intentional rather than random. Divine timing is not just a concept. It becomes the natural flow of your life when God is first. Living in this rhythm transforms your perspective on patience, preparation, and action. You stop rushing, stressing, or forcing outcomes. You begin to trust that each moment has meaning and that each step is part of a larger plan. Your faith is strengthened because you witness God's timing at work in your life. You gain confidence because you know that readiness meets opportunity, preparation meets circumstance, and purpose meets action. Life becomes a series of meaningful moments, each guided by divine timing that is revealed as you live in alignment with God's priorities. Ultimately, God-first living is the key to attracting divine timing because it aligns your heart, actions, and perspective with God's plan. Trust replaces anxiety, patience replaces impatience, and intention replaces randomness. Opportunities, relationships, and breakthroughs arrive at the right moment because your life is in sync with the rhythm of God's design. You are prepared, focused, and ready to step into what is meant for you. Divine timing is no longer a distant hope. It becomes a lived reality that transforms your life from chaotic and stressful to intentional, purposeful, and remarkably aligned with the plan God has for you. When you put God first, one of the most profound changes in your life is not always loud or dramatic. It does not always come through clear signs or unmistakable moments of revelation. More often, it comes quietly, gently, and consistently. God begins to speak in subtle ways that you may have overlooked before. Not because he was absent, but because your heart was too busy, too distracted, or too focused elsewhere to notice. When God becomes your priority, your awareness sharpens. You begin to recognize that he is speaking far more often than you realized, woven into the fabric of your everyday life. Before God is first, many people expect his voice to be unmistakable and overwhelming. They wait for dramatic signs, clear instructions, or life-altering moments. When those moments do not come, they assume God is silent. But God often speaks in ways that require stillness, attention, and trust. He speaks through impressions, nudges, and quiet clarity rather than commands or force. When your life is centered on him, you learn to listen differently. You begin to recognize that his guidance often comes softly, inviting you to pay attention rather than demanding that you react. One of the most common ways God speaks is through a sense of inner peace or unease. When you are aligned with him, you begin to notice how certain decisions bring calm while others create tension. This is not anxiety or fear, but a subtle awareness that something is either aligned or misaligned with his will. A path that looks good on the surface may feel unsettled deep within, while a choice that feels uncertain externally may bring a quiet assurance internally. This inner guidance becomes clearer the more you prioritize God, because your heart becomes attuned to his presence. You begin to trust these impressions, not as random feelings, but as gentle direction. God also speaks through timing and circumstances. When you put him first, you start noticing patterns that once felt like coincidence. Delays, interruptions, and unexpected changes begin to carry meaning. A conversation happens at just the right moment. A door closes that you were convinced needed to stay open. A delay saves you from a decision you were not ready to make. These moments are rarely dramatic, but they are intentional. God speaks through the flow of life itself, guiding your steps through events that align with your growth and purpose. When you are attentive, you realize that even setbacks carry instruction and protection. Another subtle way God speaks is through your thoughts. Not every thought is divine, but when God is first, your mind becomes a place where clarity can emerge. Certain thoughts stand out because they are calm, wise, and aligned with truth rather than fear or impulse. They do not pressure or rush you. They invite reflection and patience. These thoughts often bring perspective rather than confusion. You begin to recognize when an idea carries peace and when it carries restlessness. This discernment develops over time as your relationship with God deepens and your trust grows. God also speaks through Scripture in deeply personal ways. Words you have read many times before suddenly take on new meaning. A verse seems to address a situation you are currently facing. A passage brings comfort, correction, or encouragement exactly when you need it. This is not coincidence. When God is first, Scripture becomes more than text. It becomes a living conversation. You begin to see how ancient words apply to modern challenges, personal struggles, and everyday decisions. God uses His Word to guide, reassure, and realign your heart in ways that feel personal and timely. People are another way God speaks daily. When God is first, you begin to notice how others reflect truth, wisdom, or encouragement at exactly the right time. A friend says something that answers a question you have been carrying quietly. A stranger offers insight that shifts your perspective. A mentor gives advice that confirms something you have been sensing internally. These moments are subtle, but they carry weight. God often uses people as messengers, not through perfection, but through sincerity and timing. When your heart is open, you recognize that guidance often comes through conversation rather than isolation. God also speaks through silence. This is one of the most misunderstood forms of communication. Silence is often interpreted as absence or neglect, but when God is first, you learn that silence has purpose. In quiet moments, without distractions or noise, clarity begins to surface. You reflect more deeply, notice patterns, and gain insight. Silence creates space for growth and understanding. God uses these moments to strengthen trust, patience, and discernment. You begin to realize that not every question needs an immediate answer, and that waiting often deepens faith rather than weakening it. Your emotions can also become a channel for God's guidance. Not uncontrolled emotion, but emotional awareness. When God is first, you begin to understand why certain situations affect you deeply and others do not. Joy, conviction, compassion, and concern become signals that guide you toward purpose and alignment. God uses emotional responses to reveal values, priorities, and areas of growth. You learn to examine emotions rather than suppress or react to them. In doing so, you begin to understand what God may be drawing your attention to in your life. God speaks through repetition. When a message appears again and again in different forms, it is often intentional. A theme keeps resurfacing in conversations, thoughts, or experiences. A certain lesson continues to present itself until it is understood. When God is first, you stop ignoring these patterns and start paying attention to them. Repetition becomes a sign that something needs reflection, action, or change. God is patient, and He often reinforces guidance gently rather than forcing it. Your conscience also becomes sharper when God is first. You become more aware of choices that align with integrity and those that compromise it. This awareness is not rooted in guilt or shame, but in clarity. You begin to sense when something is right, even if it is difficult, and when something is wrong, even if it is convenient. God speaks through this moral clarity, guiding you toward decisions that reflect truth, growth, and responsibility. The more you listen, the clearer this inner guidance becomes. God also speaks through restlessness. When something is no longer aligned with your purpose, you may feel unsettled, even if everything looks fine externally. A job, habit, or relationship that once felt right may begin to feel empty or draining. This restlessness is not dissatisfaction for its own sake. It is often a signal that change is needed. When God is first, you learn to examine restlessness rather than suppress it. You ask what it is pointing toward and what adjustments may be necessary. God uses discomfort to guide transformation. Daily gratitude is another space where God speaks. When you intentionally notice what you are thankful for, you become more aware of His presence in ordinary moments. Small blessings, unexpected kindness, and moments of peace take on greater meaning. Gratitude sharpens awareness and opens the heart. God often speaks through what you notice and appreciate, reminding you that He is present not only in major moments, but in everyday life. God also speaks through redirection. Plans change. Opportunities fall through. Expectations shift. When God is first, you begin to see redirection not as failure, but as guidance. You learn to pause and ask what new direction is being revealed. God rarely shouts through redirection. He guides quietly, allowing you to notice the shift and adjust. This subtle guidance requires humility and trust, but it leads to growth and alignment. Your instincts also become refined when God is first. Not impulsive reactions, but intuitive awareness grounded in faith and experience. You begin to sense when to move forward and when to wait. These instincts develop over time as you learn to listen, reflect, and trust. God speaks through this intuitive clarity, guiding you in moments that require quick discernment. Even moments of joy and fulfillment carry messages. When something aligns deeply with your values and purpose, it often brings a sense of meaning that goes beyond satisfaction. God uses joy to affirm direction. He shows you what aligns with your calling by how it resonates within you. When God is first, you pay attention to what energizes and fulfills you, recognizing these feelings as indicators rather than distractions. Over time, you realize that God speaks constantly but subtly. His voice is woven into thought, feeling, circumstance, and connection. The key is not louder signs, but deeper attention. When God is first, you stop searching for dramatic signals and start recognizing quiet guidance. You become more present, more aware, and more responsive. Life feels less confusing because you are listening differently. The more you acknowledge these subtle ways God speaks, the clearer His guidance becomes. Trust deepens. Confidence grows. Decisions feel less overwhelming because you are not navigating alone. You begin to move with intention, guided by quiet clarity rather than pressure or fear. God's voice becomes familiar, not because it is loud, but because it is consistent. In the end, putting God first transforms the way you listen. You realize that God has been speaking all along, through moments you once overlooked and experiences you once dismissed. His guidance is present in the ordinary, the quiet, and the subtle. When you slow down, pay attention, and trust, you discover that God is deeply involved in your daily life. He speaks through peace, timing, people, scripture, silence, and inner awareness. And when you learn to listen, life becomes clearer, steadier, and filled with meaning that goes far beyond coincidence. Change is one of the few guarantees in life, yet it is also one of the most challenging experiences to navigate. When things shift unexpectedly, routines break, plans fall apart, or seasons end, it can feel unsettling even when you have strong faith. Embracing change without losing your faith is not about pretending uncertainty does not exist. It is about learning how to remain grounded when everything around you is moving. When you put God first, change no longer feels like a threat to your faith. It becomes an invitation to trust deeper, grow stronger, and see God's presence in new ways. Before prioritizing God, change often feels like loss of control. You may find yourself clinging to what is familiar because it provides a sense of security. Even good changes can create anxiety because they push you into the unknown. When faith is not deeply rooted, change can trigger doubt, fear, and questions about direction and purpose. You may wonder whether you made the wrong decision or whether God is still guiding you. These moments can feel isolating because uncertainty magnifies every unanswered question. When God is first, your relationship with change begins to shift. You start to understand that change is not evidence of God's absence, but often a sign of His movement. Faith becomes less about maintaining comfort and more about trusting the process. You realize that God does not promise a life without change, but He does promise presence through it. This understanding allows you to face transitions with steadiness rather than panic. You begin to see change as part of growth rather than a disruption of faith. One of the most important shifts happens in how you interpret endings. When something comes to a close, it is natural to grieve what is familiar. But God-first living reframes endings as transitions rather than failures. A season ending does not mean it was wasted. A door closing does not mean you missed your purpose. Trusting God allows you to honor what was while remaining open to what is coming. You learn that endings are often necessary to make room for new growth, deeper faith, and expanded purpose. Faith becomes especially important when change is unexpected. Sudden shifts can leave you feeling unprepared and overwhelmed. Plans you relied on disappear, and certainty gives way to questions. In these moments, faith is not about having immediate answers. It is about staying anchored when clarity has not yet arrived. When God is first, you resist the urge to rush decisions or force understanding. You allow space for reflection, prayer, and patience. You trust that clarity will come in time, even if the present moment feels uncertain. Change often reveals where faith is rooted. When life is stable, faith can feel effortless. When change arrives, it tests whether faith is based on comfort or trust. God-first living strengthens faith because it is not dependent on external stability. Your confidence comes from God's character rather than predictable circumstances. This foundation allows you to remain steady even when routines change, roles shift, or expectations fall apart. Faith becomes less fragile because it is not tied to outcomes. Embracing change also requires letting go. Holding too tightly to the past can make change feel painful and disorienting. When God is first, you learn that letting go is not losing faith. It is often an act of faith. You release what no longer aligns with your growth, trusting that God is leading you forward. This release creates space for new opportunities, deeper understanding, and renewed purpose. Letting go becomes an expression of trust rather than fear. Fear often accompanies change because the future feels uncertain. Without faith, fear can dominate decisions and create paralysis. God-first living does not eliminate fear, but it changes your response to it. You acknowledge fear without allowing it to control you. You recognize that uncertainty does not mean danger. It simply means the path is still unfolding. Faith provides courage to move forward one step at a time, even when the full picture is unclear. Change also challenges identity. Roles shift, relationships evolve, and circumstances change how you see yourself. When identity is tied to roles, success, or routine, change can feel destabilizing. When God is first, identity remains steady even as circumstances shift. You understand that your worth is not defined by a season or position. This allows you to adapt without losing confidence. Faith becomes the anchor that holds identity steady while life changes around you. Trusting God during change also deepens humility. You recognize that not everything is within your control, and that dependence on God is not weakness. It is wisdom. Humility opens the door to learning, growth, and guidance. You become more receptive to insight, support, and redirection. Change becomes a teacher rather than an enemy. Each transition carries lessons that strengthen character and faith. Another powerful shift occurs in how you approach decisions during change. Without faith, decisions are often driven by urgency or fear. With God first, decisions are guided by discernment and patience. You take time to listen, reflect, and seek clarity rather than reacting impulsively. This intentional approach reduces regret and builds confidence. Even when outcomes are uncertain, you trust that alignment matters more than speed. Change often reveals hidden strengths. When routines disappear and comfort zones dissolve, you are forced to rely on abilities and resilience you may not have recognized before. God uses change to stretch capacity and deepen trust. When you lean into faith, you discover strength you did not know you had. Challenges become opportunities to grow spiritually, emotionally, and mentally. Faith expands as you witness God's provision through unfamiliar territory. Relationships are also affected by change. Some connections deepen, others shift, and some fade. This can be difficult to navigate without losing faith. God-first living helps you approach relational change with grace rather than resentment. You understand that not every relationship is meant for every season. Letting go does not mean rejection. It means honoring growth. Faith allows you to remain loving and open even when dynamics change. Change often brings periods of waiting. Progress may feel slow, and clarity may take time. Waiting can test patience and confidence. When God is first, waiting is no longer wasted time. It becomes a season of preparation. You learn to trust that growth is happening even when results are not visible. Waiting strengthens faith because it teaches reliance rather than control. Embracing change without losing faith also means reframing discomfort. Growth is rarely comfortable, and change often disrupts ease. Faith allows you to endure discomfort with purpose. You recognize that discomfort does not mean you are on the wrong path. It often means you are growing. God uses discomfort to refine priorities, deepen trust, and clarify purpose. Another aspect of faith during change is learning to celebrate small signs of progress. When life feels uncertain, it is easy to focus on what is missing. God-first living shifts attention to what is present. Small moments of clarity, peace, or encouragement become reminders of God's presence. These moments build confidence and reinforce trust during transitions. Change also invites reflection. When routines shift, you have the opportunity to examine values, priorities, and direction. Faith encourages honest reflection rather than avoidance. You ask meaningful questions about alignment, purpose, and growth. This reflection leads to intentional adjustments that shape the next season of life. God uses change to realign focus and refine direction. Even failure can be part of change. Attempts may not succeed, and expectations may not be met. Faith allows you to view these moments as feedback rather than defeat. God-first living transforms failure into learning. You remain willing to adapt, try again, and move forward with resilience. Faith ensures that setbacks do not define the journey. Over time, embracing change becomes less intimidating. Each transition strengthens trust and confidence. You learn that God remains faithful across seasons. Change no longer signals instability. It signals movement. Faith becomes flexible rather than fragile, rooted in trust rather than certainty. When you look back, you begin to see how change shaped growth in ways stability never could. Lessons learned during uncertain seasons carry wisdom and depth. Faith deepens because it has been tested and proven. You recognize that change was not something to survive, but something that strengthened your relationship with God. Ultimately, embracing change without losing faith is about trust. Trust that God is present in every transition. Trust that growth often requires movement. Trust that uncertainty does not mean abandonment. When God is first, change becomes part of a meaningful journey rather than a disruption of faith. Life will continue to evolve and seasons will continue to shift. But when faith is rooted in God rather than circumstance, you remain steady. You adapt without losing direction. You grow without losing trust. You move forward with confidence, knowing that God is guiding each step. Embracing change becomes an act of faith, and faith becomes the foundation that carries you through every season with strength, clarity, and purpose. Contentment is one of the most misunderstood and quietly powerful states a person can experience. Many people chase happiness, believing it is found in achievement, comfort, recognition, or security. Yet even after reaching milestones they once dreamed of, something still feels missing. There is a restlessness that lingers, a sense that fulfillment is always just one step away. When you put God first, you begin to discover that contentment is not something you acquire. It is something you cultivate. And the secret of lasting contentment is not found in getting more, but in living aligned with what truly matters. Before God is first, contentment often feels conditional. You tell yourself you will be satisfied when circumstances improve, when goals are reached, or when life becomes easier. Contentment becomes tied to outcomes you cannot fully control. This creates a cycle of constant striving. Each achievement brings temporary relief, followed by a new desire or comparison. Even good things lose their ability to satisfy because the heart is always looking ahead. This way of living is exhausting because it places peace at the mercy of external conditions. When God becomes the center, contentment begins to shift from something external to something internal. You start to realize that peace does not come from having everything you want, but from trusting the one who holds your life. Contentment grows when you understand that your value and security are not dependent on circumstances. This realization brings freedom. You are no longer driven by the need to prove yourself, keep up with others, or constantly chase the next thing. Your heart begins to rest. Lasting contentment begins with perspective. When God is first, you start seeing life through a lens of gratitude rather than scarcity. You become aware of how much you already have rather than fixating on what is missing. This does not mean ignoring challenges or pretending difficulties do not exist. It means recognizing that even in imperfect situations, there is still meaning, provision, and purpose. Gratitude becomes a natural response rather than a forced practice. It shifts attention from dissatisfaction to appreciation, and contentment grows quietly in that space. Comparison is one of the greatest enemies of contentment. Before putting God first, it is easy to measure your life against others. Social circles, careers, relationships, and achievements become reference points for self-worth. This constant comparison fuels dissatisfaction because there will always be someone who appears to have more. God-first living interrupts this cycle. You begin to understand that your journey is unique and that comparison distorts purpose. Contentment grows when you focus on alignment rather than competition. Trust plays a central role in lasting contentment. When God is first, you trust that your life is unfolding according to a purpose that goes beyond immediate understanding. This trust reduces anxiety about the future and regret about the past. You learn to be present. Contentment thrives in the present moment, not because everything is perfect, but because you trust that this moment matters. Faith allows you to be at peace where you are, even as you continue to grow. Another shift occurs in how you define success. Without God at the center, success is often measured by external markers such as status, wealth, or recognition. These measures are unstable because they constantly change. God-first living redefines success as faithfulness, growth, and alignment with purpose. This definition is sustainable. You can experience contentment regardless of circumstances because success is no longer dependent on outcomes alone. It is rooted in intention and integrity. Desire itself is not the enemy of contentment. The problem arises when desire becomes the source of identity and worth. When God is first, desires are placed in proper perspective. You still pursue goals and growth, but they no longer control your peace. You learn to hold desires with open hands rather than clenched fists. Contentment grows when you can pursue without being consumed, when you can strive without anxiety. Simplicity also plays a role in lasting contentment. When God is first, you begin to simplify priorities. Not everything deserves your time, energy, or attention. You learn to say no without guilt and yes with intention. This clarity reduces overwhelm and creates space for what truly matters. Contentment is easier to sustain when life is not cluttered with unnecessary pressure. Simplicity allows peace to settle in naturally. Another secret of contentment is acceptance. This does not mean settling for less than your potential. It means accepting the reality of where you are without resentment. When God is first, acceptance becomes an act of trust. You acknowledge the present season without fighting it. Resistance often creates dissatisfaction, while acceptance creates peace. Contentment grows when you stop arguing with reality and start engaging with it thoughtfully. Contentment is also closely tied to identity. When identity is rooted in roles, performance, or approval, contentment is fragile. Any loss or change threatens peace. God-first living anchors identity in something unchanging. You begin to understand that who you are is not defined by what you do or what you achieve. This stability allows contentment to remain even when circumstances shift. Relationships influence contentment as well. When God is first, relationships are approached with healthier expectations. You no longer look to others to complete you or provide constant fulfillment. This reduces disappointment and pressure. You can appreciate relationships for what they are rather than what you want them to be. Contentment grows when connection is rooted in mutual respect rather than unmet expectations. Rest is another overlooked aspect of lasting contentment. Without rest, dissatisfaction grows. God-first living reminds you that rest is not laziness, but trust. Taking time to pause, reflect, and restore is an act of faith. It acknowledges that your worth is not tied to constant productivity. Contentment becomes possible when you allow yourself to rest without guilt. Discontent often arises from impatience. Wanting things to change faster than they can creates frustration. When God is first, patience becomes easier because trust replaces urgency. You understand that growth takes time and that timing matters. Contentment is sustained when you stop rushing the process and start valuing the journey. Another important shift is learning to celebrate progress rather than perfection. When contentment is tied to perfection, it is never satisfied. God-first living teaches you to recognize growth, effort, and improvement. You learn to appreciate how far you have come rather than only focusing on how far you have to go. This perspective nurtures contentment because it acknowledges progress without dismissing ambition. Suffering and hardship test contentment deeply. Without faith, hardship often leads to bitterness or despair. When God is first, hardship becomes a context for growth rather than a threat to peace. This does not mean pain disappears. It means pain does not have the final word. Contentment can coexist with difficulty when faith provides meaning and hope beyond circumstances. Forgiveness also plays a role in lasting contentment. Holding on to resentment poisons peace. God-first living encourages forgiveness not as weakness, but as freedom. Letting go of past wounds creates emotional space for contentment to grow. Peace becomes sustainable when the heart is not weighed down by unresolved anger or regret. Another secret is learning to trust provision rather than obsess over security. When God is first, you trust that your needs will be met, even if the future feels uncertain. This trust reduces anxiety and allows contentment to take root. You focus on stewardship rather than fear. Contentment grows when you believe that you are not alone in carrying life's responsibilities. Joy and contentment are closely related, but not identical. Joy can be momentary, while contentment is steady. God-first living nurtures both, but contentment provides the foundation. Joy becomes richer and more meaningful when it is supported by a sense of peace and sufficiency. Over time, you begin to realize that contentment is not passive. It is a practiced perspective shaped by trust, gratitude, and alignment. Each day presents choices about where attention is placed and what is valued. God-first living consistently directs attention toward what is eternal rather than temporary. This orientation stabilizes the heart. When you look back, you notice that contentment grew not in moments of ease, but in moments of trust. It developed as you learned to let go, to wait, to accept, and to align. The secret of lasting contentment is not found in controlling life, but in surrendering it to God. Ultimately, lasting contentment is the fruit of a God-centered life. It is not dependent on circumstances being perfect or desires being fulfilled. It is rooted in trust, perspective, and purpose. When God is first, contentment becomes steady rather than fragile. You learn to live with peace that does not rise and fall with external conditions. Life continues to bring challenges, change, and growth. But contentment remains because it is anchored in something unchanging. You move forward with ambition without anxiety, gratitude without complacency, and peace without passivity. The secret of lasting contentment is not found in having more, but in trusting more deeply. When God is first, the heart finds rest, and contentment becomes not a destination, but a way of living. For many people, work occupies a large portion of life, yet it is also one of the areas where confusion and dissatisfaction often show up the most. Questions about purpose, direction, and fulfillment surface when career choices feel disconnected from deeper meaning. Aligning your career and calling with God's plan is not about finding a perfect job or a flawless path. It is about understanding that your work can be an expression of purpose rather than a source of constant frustration. When God is first, career decisions take on a new dimension that goes beyond income, status, or approval. Before God is central, career choices are often driven by external pressure. Expectations from family, culture, or society shape decisions. Success becomes measured by titles, recognition, or financial gain. While these things are not inherently wrong, they rarely satisfy on their own. Many people achieve what they once wanted only to feel empty or restless. This restlessness often signals a deeper disconnect between what you do and who you are called to be. Without God at the center, work can become exhausting because it asks more from you than it gives back. When God becomes your priority, your understanding of calling begins to change. Calling is no longer limited to a specific role or position. It becomes a way of living that reflects your values, gifts, and faith. You begin to see that calling is less about a single destination and more about alignment. God's plan is not always revealed all at once. It unfolds through seasons, growth, and obedience. This perspective removes pressure to have everything figured out and replaces it with trust in the process. Aligning career and calling starts with identity. When your identity is rooted in God rather than in what you do, career choices become less stressful. You no longer look to work to define your worth. This freedom allows you to make decisions based on alignment rather than fear. You can pursue opportunities without feeling that your value is on the line. God-first living creates a stable foundation from which meaningful work can grow. One of the biggest shifts occurs in how you view success. Without God at the center, success often means advancement, recognition, or financial security. With God first, success becomes faithfulness, growth, and impact. This does not mean ambition disappears. It means ambition is guided by purpose rather than ego. You begin to ask different questions. Instead of asking what will make you look successful, you ask what will allow you to serve, grow, and contribute meaningfully. Discernment plays a key role in aligning career and calling. When God is first, you become more attentive to internal clarity and external confirmation. Certain opportunities may look impressive but feel misaligned. Others may seem modest but bring peace and purpose. Discernment helps you recognize which paths align with God's plan for your life. This clarity develops over time through prayer, reflection, and experience. It is not about instant answers, but about growing sensitivity to what resonates with your values and faith. Another important aspect is patience. God's plan often unfolds gradually, not according to urgency or comparison. Waiting can be difficult, especially when others appear to be moving ahead. When God is first, waiting becomes purposeful rather than frustrating. You begin to understand that preparation matters as much as opportunity. Skills, character, and wisdom are often developed during seasons that feel quiet or slow. Trusting God's timing allows you to grow into your calling rather than rush into it prematurely. Aligning your career with God's plan also requires courage. Sometimes alignment means making choices that are not immediately understood or supported by others. It may involve stepping away from paths that offer security but lack meaning. Faith provides the courage to choose integrity over convenience and purpose over popularity. This courage is not reckless. It is grounded in trust that God is guiding your steps even when outcomes are uncertain. Another shift occurs in how you approach work itself. When God is first, work becomes an act of stewardship rather than self-promotion. You view your abilities, opportunities, and responsibilities as resources entrusted to you. This mindset fosters excellence, responsibility, and humility. You work diligently not to prove your worth, but to honor the purpose behind your gifts. This approach brings fulfillment because effort is connected to meaning rather than pressure. Career transitions often test faith deeply. Job changes, setbacks, or unexpected shifts can create uncertainty. When God is first, These moments are reframed as redirection rather than failure. You begin to see how closed doors can guide you toward better alignment. Transitions become opportunities to reassess values, goals, and direction. Faith provides stability during these shifts, allowing you to remain grounded while navigating change. Another important element is understanding that calling can be expressed in many forms. It is not limited to traditional notions of purpose or ministry. God's plan can be lived out in any field through integrity, service, and impact. You begin to recognize that your influence extends beyond your job description. How you treat others, solve problems, and carry responsibility reflects your calling just as much as the role you hold. This realization broadens your sense of purpose and reduces pressure to find a single, perfect position. Alignment also involves honesty about your gifts and limitations. When God is first, you are able to assess yourself realistically without comparison or insecurity. You recognize strengths to develop and weaknesses to manage. This self-awareness helps guide career choices that fit your abilities and values. God's plan often aligns with how He has uniquely equipped you. Embracing this truth fosters confidence and clarity. Another shift occurs in how you handle ambition. Ambition without alignment can lead to burnout and dissatisfaction. God-first living transforms ambition into a desire to grow, contribute, and serve. You still pursue excellence, but you do so with balance and perspective. Ambition becomes a tool rather than a master. This balance protects peace and sustains long-term fulfillment. Workplace challenges also take on new meaning when God is first. Conflict, pressure, and obstacles become opportunities for growth rather than sources of discouragement. Faith influences how you respond to difficulty. You approach challenges with patience, wisdom, and integrity. Over time, this approach shapes reputation and impact. Your work becomes a testimony of character rather than just performance. Aligning career and calling also means learning to listen. God often guides through subtle impressions, circumstances, and confirmation over time. Listening requires stillness and humility. It means being willing to adjust plans when guidance shifts. This openness allows God's plan to unfold naturally rather than being forced. Listening becomes an ongoing practice rather than a one-time decision. Another important aspect is recognizing that seasons change. A role that aligns with your calling in one season may shift in another. God's plan evolves as you grow. Faith allows you to adapt without fear. You trust that movement does not mean instability, it means growth. This flexibility helps you remain aligned over time rather than clinging to what no longer fits. Financial considerations often complicate career decisions. When God is first, money remains important but not central. You approach finances with wisdom rather than fear. Trust in God's provision allows you to make decisions that align with values rather than solely with income. This does not mean ignoring responsibility. It means balancing practicality with purpose. Over time, alignment brings clarity and peace. You may not always feel certain, but you feel grounded. Decisions are guided by purpose rather than pressure. Work becomes more meaningful because it reflects who you are and what you value. Even difficult days carry a sense of significance because they are part of a larger picture. Looking back, you begin to see how God has guided your career through unexpected paths, lessons, and growth. Moments of uncertainty reveal themselves as preparation. Detours become necessary steps. Faith deepens as you recognize God's hand in the process. Alignment is no longer a concept. It is an experienced reality. Ultimately, aligning your career and calling with God's plan is about trust and obedience. It is about believing that your life has purpose beyond titles and achievements. When God is first, work becomes a space for growth service, and fulfillment. You move forward with confidence, knowing that your efforts matter and your path is guided. Life will continue to present choices and changes. But when your career is aligned with God's plan, you are not driven by fear or comparison. You are guided by purpose, integrity, and trust. Work becomes an extension of faith rather than a source of anxiety. In this alignment, you find not only direction, but lasting fulfillment that reaches far beyond success as the world defines it. Beloved, putting God first is not about perfection, religious performance, or having every answer figured out. It is about alignment. It is about choosing trust over control, purpose over pressure, and faith over fear. When God is first, priorities shift, peace settles in, relationships change, and even uncertainty begins to make sense. Life does not suddenly become easy, but it becomes meaningful. You start walking with clarity instead of confusion, confidence instead of anxiety, and hope instead of exhaustion. Every chapter we explored points to the same truth. God is not distant from your daily life. He is present in your decisions, your work, your relationships, and your seasons of change. When you invite Him into the center of it all, you begin to experience a deeper peace and a steadier joy that circumstances cannot take away. If this message connected with you, we invite you to pause right now and join us in prayer. Wherever you are, take a moment to quiet your heart. Let us ask God for guidance, clarity, and the courage to truly put Him first. Let us pray for peace in uncertainty, strength in transition, and trust in His timing. This is not the end of the conversation. It is the beginning of a deeper walk with God, together. God, I come before you with an open heart and a quiet spirit. I slow myself down in this moment and set aside every distraction, every worry, and every expectation. I acknowledge that you are present here, not distant, not unaware, but fully attentive to my life as it is right now. I do not come with perfect words or polished thoughts. I come as I am, trusting that you already know what I need before I speak. I thank you for your patience with me. There have been moments when I rushed ahead without listening, when I tried to control outcomes instead of trusting your guidance. Yet you remained faithful. You did not withdraw when I doubted or struggled. You stayed near, steady and consistent, waiting for me to turn my attention back to you. For that, I am deeply grateful. God, I ask you to take first place in my life, not just in my words, but in my decisions, my priorities, and my daily actions. I surrender the areas where I have been holding on too tightly. I release the need to have everything figured out. Teach me how to trust you more deeply, especially when the path ahead feels uncertain. Help me to rely on your wisdom rather than my own understanding. I ask for clarity in the areas where I feel confused. When choices feel overwhelming and direction feels unclear, quiet my mind and steady my heart. Help me recognize your guidance, even when it comes softly. Train my heart to notice the peace you give when something is aligned and the unease that signals a need to pause. I want to be attentive to your voice in the ordinary moments of my life. God, I bring my fears to you, the fears I speak about and the ones I keep hidden. Fear of failure, fear of change, fear of letting go, fear of not being enough. I place them in your hands, knowing that you are not intimidated by my honesty. Replace fear with trust. Replace anxiety with peace. Remind me that I am never walking alone, even when the road feels unfamiliar. I ask you to strengthen my faith during seasons of waiting. When progress feels slow and answers feel delayed, help me remember that waiting is not wasted time. Teach me how to grow in patience without losing hope. Help me trust that you are working behind the scenes, preparing me for what is ahead. Give me the endurance to remain faithful even when results are not immediate. God, I ask you to align my desires with your will. Where my desires are driven by comparison, ego, or fear, gently reshape them. Where they reflect purpose, service, and growth, give me the courage to pursue them with faith. I want my life to reflect what matters to you, not just what looks impressive to others. I pray for peace in my heart that is not dependent on circumstances. When life feels unstable or unpredictable, anchor me in your presence. Teach me how to rest in you even when responsibilities feel heavy. Help me release the pressure to constantly strive and prove myself. Remind me that my worth is not earned through performance, but rooted in your love. God, I ask you to guide my steps in my work and calling. Open doors that align with your plan and close those that would lead me away from purpose. Give me discernment to recognize opportunities that reflect your direction. Help me work with integrity, humility, and excellence, knowing that my efforts matter when they are aligned with you. I bring my relationships before you. Where there is tension, bring understanding. Where there is distance, bring healing. Where there is growth needed, give me humility. Teach me how to love with patience, speak with wisdom, and forgive with grace. Help me release relationships that no longer align with the season you are leading me into, and give me peace in letting go. God, I ask for strength during times of change. When routines shift and certainty fades, remind me that you remain constant. Help me embrace change without losing faith. Teach me to see transitions as opportunities for growth rather than threats to stability. Give me the courage to step forward even when the future feels unclear. I pray for contentment to take root in my heart. Not complacency, but a deep sense of peace and sufficiency in you. Help me appreciate where I am while still trusting you for what is next. Free me from the trap of comparison and constant dissatisfaction. Teach me how to live with gratitude and presence. God, I ask you to help me listen better, not just in prayer, but in daily life. Slow me down enough to notice the ways you are guiding me through people, moments, and quiet impressions. Help me trust the subtle ways you speak and respond with obedience, even when guidance feels small or simple. I bring my failures and regrets to you, the moments I wish I could redo, and the choices I wish I had made differently. I trust that nothing is wasted in your hands. Redeem what feels broken. Use what feels lost to shape wisdom and growth. Help me move forward without carrying the weight of shame or self-condemnation. God, I ask for courage to live my faith openly and authentically. Not perfectly, but honestly. Help my actions reflect what I believe. Teach me how to walk with integrity in both visible and hidden moments. I want my life to point back to you, not through words alone, but through how I live. I pray for resilience when life feels heavy. When challenges arise and strength feels low, renew me. Give me rest when I am tired and hope when I feel discouraged. Remind me that I do not have to carry everything on my own. Teach me how to lean on you without hesitation. God, I place my future in your hands, the plans I have made and the ones I have not yet imagined. I trust you to guide me step by step. Help me stay present, faithful, and open as you lead. Teach me how to walk forward with confidence rooted in trust rather than certainty. I end this prayer with gratitude. Gratitude for your faithfulness, your patience, and your constant presence. Thank you for meeting me where I am and for walking with me into what is next. I choose to put you first, not just today, but daily. I trust you with my life, my growth, and my journey ahead. Amen. Thank you for joining us. If this message brought Jesus' love to your heart, type Amen in the comments. Click on the left for more uplifting messages and don't forget to subscribe. May Jesus' blessings overflow in your life.